Dr. Alauna, trauma psychiatrist, and welcome to Demystifying Mental Health on blackdoctor.org. I'm so excited today about our episode, and it's titled We Deserve Better. Okay, tackling racism, caste, and mental health together. Y'all, you see this sign that I have that says it's time to evolve? I mean it. I mean it is time for we can't help but evolve in some ways. The world pushes us towards certain things, but on racism in particular, on this caste system, on these artificial systems that allow us to think of create artificial fictional divisions in humans and make that determine something about their lives, it's time for us to evolve past that. So, what we do know is that racism is a mental health issue because racism causes a massive amount of psychological trauma in our population. Studies have shown that groups that go through years and years and long periods of harsh experiences like slavery, war, genocide, those groups tend to have more physical and mental health problems generations after, right? And we know that Americans, Black Americans in particular, those of African descent, whose ancestors endured the harsh treatment of slavery, that was a brutal experience that lasted for generation after generation after generation. So it is understandable that us even coming out of legal slavery, we still have not freed our physical and psychological impact of slavery on our body, on our brain, on our belief systems, and our social lives. So these effects continue even to this day. And in fact, they don't just affect the Black community, they affect all of us, right? History is American history. The Black experience is so powerful that it impacts all of us and it affects Black and white alike. So that's what we're going to really be digging into today, how our past and present traumas are still impacting us because we have not dealt with racism and what that means. So I'm excited to bring in my guest. Let me just introduce her to you. Her name is Tracie Jae, and she is just an amazing conversational architect. Tracie is a human connector, and her recent work, I just had the wonderful privilege to enjoy our old house presentation recently, and that work is centered around the U.S. Constitution and how we have evolved as a country. And that's also based around Isabel Wilkerson's 8 Pillars of Caste. So before we meet Tracie, I want to make sure that we make the connection between mental health and how these social systems of racism and caste meaning you are born into a system that says that because of whatever we've labeled you, this is your ceiling in life. This is as far as you can go. And we think of caste more as something that happens in countries like India, but caste is really also part built bread and butter into American society. So Tracy's going to help us understand that deeper. But there was a term that I coined back in 2015 as I was studying the after the death of Michael Brown Jr. in 2014. And it was important to me because that was a big wake up call, if you will, for me about where we were as a society regarding race and racism. And I'm a PTSD specialist. At the time, I was working at the VA, and I was hearing the same patterns of trauma that was not just coming to my patients, right? Because my ears were honed to hear those patterns. And I was hearing them not only in my patients and in my colleagues and in my family and my friends. And I'm like, what is going on here? Everybody is sounding traumatized. And then I'm watching the coverage and seeing how the same images and the same situations are leading to vastly different interpretation and language. One channel, the same image protester, and the other channel it's a rioter, and just seeing the division of society. And I realized, like, wow, we have societal traumatic stress syndrome, not PTSD. PTSD is post traumatic stress syndrome. I'm like, this is not post. We're not finished with this. Okay. We are still very much in the midst of our traumatic stress syndrome, and it's societal. We're having a emotional difficulty even agreeing on the same base information, the same fact patterns. And so this is part of what I want to get into today. So thank you so much for joining us. Forget, do me a favor, click that like button and make sure that you comment, that you ask your questions. We'll do our best to get to your questions at the end or incorporate them into our future episodes. But thank you so much for following this page, and make sure that you subscribe to Dr. Alauna, where you can get more information about me and about the Dr. Alauna Trauma Recovery Institute, which is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the mission of eradicating psychological trauma through mental health education and programming like this. So let me set the stage, okay? Because this episode is We Deserve Better, tackling racism, caste, and mental health together. And just for context, I have some statistics that I want to share with you about Black mental health and how important it is for us to consider this topic. Black Americans experience higher rates of mental health issues and lower rates of mental health care utilization than other groups. Now, we're going to talk about why that is, and we're going to get into that a little later in the episode. But I'm sure that you all have some ideas, right, about why we not only experience more mental health challenges like depression and anxiety and PTSD and substance use problems and personality struggles and all of those things, and we have the nerve to have a lower utilization of mental health resources for various reasons, right? This can be financial reasons. This is access reasons. This is stigma reasons. We have some very strong stigmas that we're going to talk about. According to the U.S. Office of Minority Health, Black adults are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health issues than the general population. 20%. And when they say serious mental health issues, they're talking about bipolar disorder, schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. They're talking about the type of conditions that disable people and that take people into where they may not even be able to care for themselves. That's what they mean by serious mental illness, where they have to take medications. They may be interfacing with the system and getting hospitalized, suicidality. All of these things are connected to this. So then we talk about Black emerging adults, 18 to 25. Our children. I know we have this tendency to think we're done at 18, but the brain is not even fully developed until 25. So listen, that transitional youth population experiences higher rates of mental health problems than older Black adults and white emerging adults. Our young people are having a significant amount of stressors. So as I share those statistics with you, and we think about how do we why why would this be the case, right? So you can comment some of your ideas on why it is the case that these racism, uh, classism, financial, those things, uh, what I would say is a trauma driven economic system. Okay. And the incentives that we have right now of making money and making profit in these organizations is driving greed, separation, and continuation of dehumanizing behaviors in our population. So, with that, I think that it's a great time to bring in our guest today, Tracie Jae, because Tracie is really doing some wonderful work with curating healthy space for us to have conversations that help us evolve. Our Old House, a look at our America, is a conversation about who we are as a nation and as citizens and how we got this way, right? It's so important that we examine not only why we have these caste systems, but how do we dismantle them. So, Tracie, thank you for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about how Our Old House and your work came to even be.
So let's see. What's the short answer? Um, I read Caste in 2020, the book Caste by Isabel Wilkerson, and it was. I should say that I listened to Caste because audiobooks save my life these days.
Mm,
So I listened to Caste in 2020, and it was um, one of the most profound books that I read probably in my life, but certainly in 2020. And I really appreciated the way that she broke down American history and made it palatable and easy to digest. Um, and one of the analogies that she uses in her book is she compares America to an old house. Um, and if you have ever lived in an old house, you know what that's like, right? I live in an old house, so I know what that's like, right? We have
mm,
some places where the floor creaks or the roof leaks or the foundation is not quite steady, right? And when you live in an old house, you get to make a decision. I'm going to live with it like it is, and I'm going to work around all the places where things are falling apart, or I'm going to roll up my sleeves and fix it.
yeah, bring it up to code.
Right. Exactly. Right. Or if I can't fix it myself, I'm going to find somebody who can help me fix it. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And another point that she made about old houses is if we move into an old house, which all of us have, this America is our old house. If you move into an old house, it's not your fault that it is the way it is, but it is your problem. And
Mm,
so you don't have to feel personally responsible for the mess that it's in. But if you let it stay a mess, that's on you.
mm, mm. Come on, sis. And that are right in this America that we have. Sometimes I get frustrated with all the stuff going on, and I start thinking about where would I want to go? Where would I want to live? I have friends. We're talking about, listen, what other countries can we consider? Because this is some shenanigans. And then I remember that my ancestors, they had to go through much worse, and that we still have to do the work of our generation to continue to hold America accountable for what she is and what she has become and who she will be, right? And so
Exactly.
I believe firmly that understanding our history really helps you understand how to do that work. So I want to see if you and I can do something. We're going to take a meander through American history, but we're going to think about the myths that we had to accept in order to engage in this. So let's stroke on back to the 1700s, right?
Okay.
17 not quite 1776, right? We got to go back to the 1750s, let's say, right? Now we know there was already colonialism and other things going on. Um, but we also know that the foremothers and forefathers of America, because women were present, they like to act like, just because they only cared enough to document the men's version of the story. The women weren't there. We're population, no matter what y'all try to do about it. Okay. So these people who came over here and landed on these shores and these islands were running from trauma themselves, right? They were trying to practice a version of Christianity that they wanted to practice in Europe, and they were being systematically abused, right? And so they brought their little happy tails over here, took one good look at the other human beings walking around, the Native Americans who are looking like, who are these people? These stragglers coming in here, right? And decided they were going to take over this whole thing, right? Manifest from the root. You've done an amazing job of really kind of encapsulating, I think, in your work, some of the mindsets that were going on in the early days. So can you speak a little bit about like what was going on as the Constitution and these other the thought processes? Because remember, we're skipping things, right? The Declaration of Independence, the we don't have time to go into a whole history lesson about it, y'all. But just understanding that by the time we made the Constitution, we were still not in an evolved space. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Well, we're still not in an evolved space. Let's just be real about that. But and also I want to make sure that your audience knows that I am not a historical scholar by any stretch of the imagination. I grew up in a house where my father said, if you learn how to read, you can't be fooled. And so I try to read as much as I possibly can. And this document, the United States Constitution, governs the way we live in this country. Flaws and all, it is the document that we have. And so I think that we've been treating the Constitution kind of like we treat religious documents. Like we trust that somebody else has read it and understands it better than we do, and they're going to tell us what's in it.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot continue to live like that. So I encourage everybody, before we go down this history trail, to pick up a copy of the Constitution, download the Constitution app, find it online, whatever, read it for yourself.
Yes. And I think we actually will, in our resources from the show and the show notes, we put some of the links that you've given us to be able to find those. And I was, I know that there are amendments to the Constitution, but just talking about it yesterday and talking about the 10th Amendment and the 25th Amendment and other things that as they came about, that you have to consider that it took years and years for us to do basic things like acknowledge other human beings are count as a full person, not a fraction of a person.
Exactly. Right? So the original Constitution, right, before we have the Bill of Rights, before we have amendments, that document, I'm trying to find a date, the ratification date. It was in the late 1700s. I can't remember the year right now.
Right.
But almost as soon as it was ratified, we have this Bill of Rights, because they realized immediately, you know what, we forgot some stuff.
Yeah, this was insufficient.
This wasn't quite going to cut it. Right? Mm-hmm. And I want to make note that those first 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. Right? That word rights is important, because the framers of the Constitution, even though they weren't acknowledging all humans at the time, they were really acknowledging was land-owning white men.
White men, right.
Right? Mm-hmm. So even though they weren't acknowledging all the human beings at the time, their thought process was, this first document does not have enough rights.
We need to continue to respond to the changing and evolving circumstances.
Yes. Let us make sure that the citizens of this country have their rights, and have their rights in writing, so they know what they are. Mm-hmm. And thus far, all the amendments that have come after that have also been to expand the rights.
Not dismantle them, not take them away.
Not dismantle them.
Interesting. So now we're in this space where we're using these documents as if they have some mythical ability that when we put something in the law, it delivers our brains from the problems, right? And so even as we have moved into our current state, right? Like, people go, well, we outlawed slavery way back in the day, and nobody here alive right now had anything to do with that. And I would challenge that we are yet free. So this is one of those myths, right? That even though we just celebrated Juneteenth, right? And that was the the enslaved people in Texas had been deliberately, I want to point out to people that it wasn't just an accident that they didn't get the word. The Union Army still had to continue to work its way through resistors and other factions that still were saying, no, we're keeping our slaves, we're keeping the status quo. And finally get to Galveston and deliver the message and liberate the people that they did not have to continue to operate in that way. So while we're celebrating Juneteenth and we are, it's so important to recognize that every step of the way, uh, in America, we have forced people to have to fight to be recognized as just an equal human.
Yeah. And also, I think it's important for us to note that Juneteenth was not the end, right? There were still people enslaved in America beyond Juneteenth.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the ratification of the 13th Amendment, which in theory ended slavery, legal slavery in America, there's still a loophole in there. I've started referring to this as like history with an asterisk, right? Like everywhere you look, there's a little footnote, a little asterisk.
Well, they can still be slaves if they're in prison. They can still be slaves if they're, in some sort of format that we can punish them in.
Exactly. So that 13th Amendment, the loophole, the asterisk, if you will, is slavery is illegal except if a person has been convicted of a felony. Right.
Right.
So then that idea leads to criminalization of everyday behaviors. Right. We go through this long period of history where we have the black codes, right, where Black citizens can be imprisoned for things like loitering, like not moving off the sidewalk when a white person is passing, like making eye contact with random white people, or like making a compliment, an unwanted compliment to a white person. Right? These were punishable crimes for which you could be imprisoned, for which you could be enslaved.
Mm-hmm. And then, as Kendrick said, the settlers were using the town folk to make them richer. And this is the element of taking those enslaved people. And, we talk about chain gangs, building the roads and the infrastructure and the railroads and the systems that actually helped make America functional for a very cheap price, right? Because you don't have to pay these people. You just have to barely keep them alive if you even do that. So
right. And I want to also, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I know that we are focusing primarily on the sort of binary of black and white, but I also want to call in that America has mistreated lots of non-white people. They have also mistreated poor white people.
They've mistreated every immigrant class, even when they've been able to eventually meld into the imaginary culture that we call whiteness, because it's not a race. Right. If you all have followed me at all, you've heard me say that humans are 99.9% the same genetically, and we are one human race with multiple ethnicities. So there's no such thing as biracial because it's just one race. There are certainly people that have mixed ethnicity, which is the changes on the exterior that happen based on the pressures of the environment that change some of the presentation of people's skin or their eye shape or their hair color and curl, etc. But to bring that home, understanding that every group that has tried to come to America and enjoy the fruits of America has had to be mistreated for at least a period of time, and they have their own bag of trauma. So I think that's also really important as well as that being an oppressor is traumatic. I want people to understand that the white the problems, some of the problems that we see in our society today, in having people that cannot hear history without feeling embarrassment and shame, that makes them delusional in their efforts to not have to see reality. Those are byproducts of us never dealing with the ramifications of these divisions that we accept in our society of racism and caste. Any thoughts on that?
Whew, so many thoughts,
Right?
but
That's a I'm sorry.
but we've been saying the word caste a few times here, so I want to offer the listeners Isabel Wilkerson's definition of caste.
Yeah, thank you.
So she says a caste system is an artificial construction, a fixed and embedded ranking of human value that sets the presumed superiority, supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other groups on the basis of ancestry and often immutable traits, traits that would be neutral in the abstract, but are ascribed life and death meaning in a hierarchy favoring the dominant caste whose forebears designed it. So that was a lot of words, but I want to emphasize the word artificial. I want to emphasize the word fixed, right? It's not something you can move out of once you're placed into it, right? So there's a debate in America often, like, does America have a class system or does it have a caste system? Mm-hmm. And we discussed this a little bit in the Our Old House conversations. So a class system you can move in and out of, right? And a caste system is fixed. Well, in America, people who have brown or darker skin are in both systems often. And sometimes you are in an elevated class system, mm-hmm. but you cannot still escape your caste system, mm-hmm. which is why people still raise their eyebrows or get like super excited when we have the first Black whatever, or when a person exceeds expectations of what a person in this caste should be capable of. Mm-hmm. And we have, he went to Harvard. Okay, so what? Like, Black people are smart. They can go to Harvard. And also, what made Harvard the standard? Right? Like,
so that goes into the myth busting, right? So this is our myth busting segment, because that's really important for us. How mental health challenges that people regularly have that are just the product of a system that has told us over and over again that we are less than, that there should be some lower expectation. The concept that some Black people are smart and some Black people are not. Look, anytime you are generalizing any group of people, you are operating on delusional belief systems, because a generalization by default does not take into account that there are millions, if not billions, of this particular type of person you're describing. And that while you can have, just like you can have highly intelligent Indian or Korean or white American, you can have an intelligent Black person just like you can have one that ain't so book learned, right? Okay. So again, and it is also not even about academic education, because I know a lot of people who are wiser and smarter and educated, but did not go through those specific channels of educational institutions. So it's just the concept of generalization in and of itself is a offshoot of slavery. I believe that's a myth that we have to bust, that you can ever know something about someone from a stereotype or generality. What are some other, Tracie, help me here. And those of you all who are watching in the chat, you can also drop this. What are some of the mental health myths in the Black community that you think stem from slavery? or are coming out of slavery?
Laziness.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
First of all, how do you work people sun up to sundown for free for centuries and then call
And
them lazy?
and matter of fact, in psychiatry, they had a condition they called drapetomania, which they totally made that up, right? As a category of like, this is a slave that doesn't want to work, and the treatment is, oh, surprising, beatings, right?
Exactly.
So the concept that now that we are in a space where we don't have to, I mean, even thinking about how our work culture has gone, we had to make them put laws on the books to not make people work 60, 70 hours, 80 hours a week. Like, that's thinking of a human being like a cog in a wheel, not like a healthy individual. And to is that's thinking of human beings like, who needs to be home to raise their kids or have breaks or have time off if they get sick. Like, just the fact that we still have arguments about whether people deserve to have these things is part of our sickness of slavery, in my opinion. Here's another one that I think about. Because Black people have been so strong in Christianity and their faith, we don't need therapy, right? Don't tell my business. Don't talk outside of the house. What, right?
What happens in the house stays in the house.
Right. What happens is, don't talk about our business in the streets. So many people with imposter syndrome. So
Yeah,
many times that people say, I am uh what if I'm not enough? What if I'm not supposed to be here? Now,
yeah,
imposter syndrome is one of those things that drives me nuts, because I think about this world and how many different people are on it, and how, like, if you are in a space that you're not feeling welcome, it's not because you're not good enough. It's because they don't appreciate that in a world this big with so many different types of peoples and thought processes, your products would be better with input from a lot of different minds and a lot of different thought processes. So why would we not want to have inclusion and equity other than this inability to accept our discomfort, right? Our emotional discomfort.
yeah.
Any other ones that you could think of, or any thoughts on that?
Yes. So, tied to what you just said, is there's two thoughts happening simultaneously in my mind. One is my original degree is in business, right? And one of those things that people they reminded us over and over again is that people do business with who they know, like, and trust, right? Well, we have developed these know, like, and trust bubbles,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if you don't ever expand your own circle of humans outside of the people who you already know, like, and trust,
Right.
how do you know that you know, like, and trust anybody else?
Yeah, you don't, because you've made it a system that excludes anything that, oh, you're speaking another language that makes me uncomfortable. Instead of me trying to engage in understanding your language or your lingo, I have to get it away from me because it shakes
Exactly.
me up on the inside. And that's what I mean by white folks got to heal and do their work just like the rest of us do. But
Yeah.
another one that someone in the chat mentioned, that we can all dance and we all have musical ability, right? Which I wish that was true, but it is not. But that does bring to a good point that we became good at entertainment damn near through threat of death. Okay. Like, I'm going to fiddle my butt off to entertain you so that you don't sell me or trade me or harm me and my family. I want to be on your good side. And there certainly was pain incentive to be good at entertaining, to be good at dancing, right?
Yeah.
When you're labor to build something, yeah, those muscles get hard and massive and beautiful, and you can do a lot of things. So, oh, look, we're good athletes. Look, we've passed this musculature and these beautiful curvy bodies down generation to generation. So, in on one hand, it's been a benefit to us because this is the way that we've been able to create some wealth in our entertainment industry, but also we have so much violence in our music that is translating into real life situations. We have so many people using their bodies to get the recognition and hypersexualizing in order to be successful, when, you know, all of that was built into how we have in this space. Did you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, I wanna go back to the statement about the violence showing up in the music. I really think it's the other way around. I really think America is built on violence. It has a history of violence. It has solved all of its problems through violence. Violence first, even, right?
You can be the biggest, baddest king, ruling, right?
Exactly.
Manifest destiny.
Exactly. So I think the music is a reflection of the violence that we just know because it's in our bodies. Like we don't know any other way first. We think violence first, right? And then another myth that came to mind was this myth of professionalism. Like, what does it look like to be professional? What does it look like to sound professional, right? We had to have a whole act of Congress just so people could wear their hair the way it grows out of their head.
Right. And still fighting for it.
Right? We still, in Texas, in cities near Houston, we have young men who are being put in all-day suspension because of the way they wear their hair. So they are being denied an education because and isolated because of a hairstyle.
Right. Like, what does that have to do with my brain's ability to learn and reflect this material? So that's that, you know, I want to make sure that we recognize some of the things that are in the chat, because, you know, these myths have gone across, like, how do we present professionalism? These myths are about thinking about it's the devil that creates the evil in the world. I know that there's a lot of people who look that very strongly. And I'm like, man, y'all really give Shatana, Lucifer, Beelzebub a lot of credit for things that I see humans doing in their biological responses, right? But these myths all have a role in what we call depression and anxiety and PTSD. And when we are struggling, had the words often to appreciate what's actually happening, because we're supposed to pray it away. If I'm not just feeling good, then something is wrong with me. I'm losing it. I'm crazy, or I'm weak because I need to cry. Or I'll give an example recently of somebody that was saying, you know, girl, I just lost it and I don't know what's wrong with me. And, you know, my husband has away 4 years ago and I just haven't moved on. And I just broke down the other day and I just feel like I'm going crazy. And then I'm like, it was the anniversary of to feel these normal human emotions of grief, but we're so uneducated about just basic emotions and basic health that often our language is clunky and doesn't capture normal human emotions that happen when you're going through traumas, when you're being brick walls at work because you know that you have a skill set, but you're being passed over. Like, race can make you feel crazy because it's invisible so often.
Part of that, Dr. Alauna, is residuals from slavery also, because we were not allowed to have those emotions, right? And even when we were on the auction block and our families were being stripped away from us, we were punished for emoting in any way other than happiness, right? We were supposed to still be joyful, even in these moments of great distress. And so just genetically, I think we are predispositioned to shut that off, right? Yeah. And we're only just now getting to a place in our human evolution and in our American evolution where it feels even a little bit safe to have these expressions, right?
Yeah.
So I'm super grateful that you continue to educate people on like what is happening inside our brains. Um,
Mhm.
but like we don't know, right? So so I try hard not to fault us for not doing the things we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And historically, we just haven't known. We haven't had the space. We haven't had the grace to be able to be our full human selves, and that includes emotions.
Absolutely. And that is a perfect segue to the path forward, because I think it's so important that when we talk about all these problems and these challenges that we have, how do we move forward? And my answer to that is that we have to understand the impact of these traumas on our thought processes. So even for me, as a PTSD specialist, I went to the best of schools and universities and trainings and got the A's and got the transcripts. If you want to see them, I got them. Okay. But never once in there did it acknowledge how systematic racism had impacted me. I was being impacted in that space, watching what happened to my childhood home, St. Louis, growing up from white flight, and from the counselor who looked at my straight A's and was still like, "I don't think you want to be a doctor, though. People like you don't become doctors." It was like, what, right? Like, so even in those spaces where you are, one of the biggest things that is a product of not dealing with slavery is just what we talked about. Like, the psychiatric and mental health system is set up around mostly the knowledge of white men, and some other people have recently been incorporated in thinking about these mental health conditions. But when you are part of the problem, it's very difficult to identify yourself as the issue. So many people's traumas, especially racial trauma, had never been addressed to even be included. It's racial related trauma is not even mentioned in all that DSM-5 book. And that's because they can't, when you are part of it, you have a tendency to go, "Oh, what's wrong with them? It's not me, it's them." And we have carried this lack of validation, this gaslighting from America, that is
Mm-hmm.
still happening, and that is traumatic. We feel that when people are like, when the Nikki Haley's of the world are like, "But in my experience," and it's like, okay, well, good, sis, you are like one of millions of people in the country to hear what someone else who actually has gone through this would say too, right? So
Yeah,
we have this um, extreme blind spot, right? And the only way to fix it is to acknowledge it, to educate ourselves about it, and to begin to look very directly at it. You can't fix a problem you don't name.
yeah,
And so understanding that all of us are impacted by racism, not no matter who you are, ethnicity, how your people got here, they went through trauma. And those people that were going through that trauma, not only did they pass it to you through your genetics, right? Because we've shown that, for the science, the telomeres and the other genes that start showing up, that we pass it genetically, but we also have myths and a lot of thought processes and behaviors that we teach through, like, I may not say learn this lesson today, but you learn it through what we don't talk about, and
yeah,
you learn it through what you see your family members and the people around you do.
yeah. There's
Go.
a framework that I share in my work that I use. It's human, so I call it a more human approach. And
Mhm.
human stands for honest, urgent, meaningful, accountable, and nuanced. And so, just like your point that you just made, like we have to start by telling each other the truth, right? We can't avoid the truth. We have to start there, right? And then we have to treat the things that are urgent as urgent, and we have to do it in a meaningful way, right? Like we talked about earlier with the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is to expand the rights of the citizens, not to reduce them, right? It is meaningful to expand the rights of people, right, and not to reduce them. And the accountability piece, right, starts with us, and then also expands to our immediate family and our circles and the places we work and the places we spend our money and the people who we elect, right?
Right.
And then the nuance is that like all of us are having a similar and different human experience at the same time. And so we have to acknowledge that in all the places we interact with other humans, that their stuff is not my stuff, but it is.
You said a word there, sis. Like we're all having a similar but different experience. And in your experience, you are often honing that you are okay. Sister Yvonne said in the chat, one myth is that my parents beat me and I turned out okay. And I'll be over here like, but did you though? Did you? We're like, because you can be in life, you can be making money and paying your bills and being what we would call successful, but expressing yourself emotionally like a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old or whatever space where you've experienced your greatest traumas, we often harbor those behaviors and those thought processes, and it comes out in the way that we cope with things, right? Some of the residual of slavery is our substance use, right? When you experience so much pain, like maybe somebody's not necessarily physically whipping you anymore, but when you go to work and you deal with racist comments or people who do things and undermine you, or you go around in society and you have to deal with the impacts of poverty and gun violence and things in your community, they numb out through lean and Percocet and Molly's and doing drugs. And, now coming to the light, Cat Williams said 2024 was going to be a year of truth, right?
He
And
did.
there are some truths that are in plain sight. And so Tracie, I just want to make sure that I give you the space to tell us where to find you. And before I sum up the episode, I want to make sure that they get a chance to know, how do we get in touch with you?
So the easiest way is to go to my website, which is thequietrebel.org altogether. I'm also on Instagram, but as the people say, I'm Googleable. So I'm easy to find if you Google me and you spell my name correctly, Tracie with an IE, JAE. I'm easy to find. And also, I want to just share one more like path forward if I can. So one of the things I do so that I don't turn to the Percocet and other types of self-medications is I blow bubbles. So I found that blowing bubbles helps me remember to breathe, but it also helps me watch things leave my body that don't belong there. So it's a tool I try to equip other people with. So it seems simple, and we take it for granted when children are doing it, but it really is helpful.
Thank you so much for that. And Tracie is the Quiet Rebel. How do we find you on social media?
So I'm on Instagram mostly, which is the Quiet Rebel LLC. I'm also on LinkedIn, so if you want to connect with me in a professional space, that's the best place. And it's just me, Tracie Jae.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for that, Tracie. And so I also want to point in the chat, like there's great ideas. Thank you for dropping some of your concepts. Oh, Tracie, hit me with those one more time, right? The bubbles help with the breathing, with your breath work. We talk about being, somebody mentioned being playful, right? Getting back to that space where we do some of the things that help us find joy and love and truth and quiet, right? If you guys follow me, you know that I always like to give exercises and skills. I'm the skills over pills doc, Tracie, because if we cannot do anything else, we can challenge ourselves to practice mindfulness, right? Practicing being fully present in our body. All this trauma, all this stress makes us tend to want to zone out, makes us tend to, when we're feeling things, we just want to distract ourselves, whether it's with video games or social media, or you know how we do, right? We drink, we smoke, pop pills, put on whatever music, shop. There's so many things that we do to try to address what's really going on inside of us, which is our emotions are churning. Our body wants us to have a good cry about something that we don't want to think about. And what do? We just we try to suppress it. Yep. So I encourage one of my thank you for sharing about the bubbles. one of the things that I encourage people to do is allow yourself space to have a controlled cry. It is perfectly reasonable to sometimes be like, you know what, I'm going to carve out some time to think about everything that I'm upset about. Get a journal, get a book, and start listing the things that bother you. If you know some people who are like, nah, I mean, I don't cry. I don't want, I'm too cold. I'm too hard to do. You're human and you've been through a lot of trauma. And we are actively going through trauma every day right now as our world is evolving and resetting. A metamorphosis is messy, right?
Yes.
We,
Yes.
our Constitution and this process of America, amendments and the changes that we have, there have been other times where we have had drama like this, so we can get through this. But the question is going to be, what do I do? How do I change the world through working on myself, right?
Exactly.
Doing
Exactly.
my own mental work and thinking about, where am I passing down beliefs, traumatized behaviors? You know, we somebody in the chat asked, how do we heal this like, right, this has been generations and generations of people being torn down, or we're trying to rise above miseducation, lack of education, cultural violence that's deeply embedded in American society. I personally think we can solve it like this year.
Let's go. Let's do it. Let's solve it.
Right, right. I don't want to wait another 400 years.
It's that
I don't.
urgency I mentioned. Let's get to it. Let's do it.
It's time, right? It's time to evolve because we do not have to keep doing this. I think that's a really important concept for people to understand. Most people think that change has to be over eons and decades and stuff. Yesterday, we were talking, and I was like, "How?" I asked Alexa, "How old is America?" And Alexa was like, "America's like 247 years old, but North America is millions of years."
Exactly.
Right? Even Alexa, even AI checked us like, "Hey, no matter how what you think that this is, there's more going on here than what you've been taught."
Yep.
And if you can update your own thought processes and update how you think about things, that is the answer. So, thank you, Tracie, for being here today. I am going to let you get on about your way, but I'm so grateful that you brought your expertise as the quiet rebel, and you are an observer, you are a scholar, you are a uh, important conversation maker for how what amendments do we need to make, not just on our Bill of Rights and on our Constitution, but what amendments do we need to make about how we think about ourselves and this brain and our own mental health, right? So thank you
Yes.
for being here today, Tracie. And I'm going to tell you all a little bit about how you can find me in the future. So, once again, if you've enjoyed this conversation, this is Demystifying Mental Health. We are a monthly show every fourth Thursday at noon Central Standard Time. We come to you with conversations about some of the most pressing topics happening and how we take mental health from being something that seems so far away and so difficult to understand into relatable, actionable things that we can do in our own everyday life to change the trajectory, right? So you can always follow me, Dr. Alauna, Dralauna, on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. Find me on your favorite platform and make sure that you follow so that you can get more information about our upcoming programs. We will have resources for you. So if you come back to this episode, or if you look at the show notes, you'll find a link to our resource list. And also join me for the Trauma Cure. The Trauma Cure is our 3-day live educational program. The Trauma Cure stands for Creators Using Radical Empathy. Everything that I do centers around the concept that empathy is the cure for the challenges that humans are having, and understanding our identity as creators, our brain and biology and how it functions, and get motivated this empathy skills is what is going to help us heal. So come learn more about your own brain. This is the best way to work with me. So many people are like, Doc, I want to learn all this stuff. How can I work with you? Have a weekend together learning about the brain, the body, and how it generates our behavior. So key takeaways for this program. Number one, we have to bust the myths of and really look at the things that slavery has caused for us. So this is the resource list. Make sure if you want to learn more about this and the trauma cure, you check out detry.org and thetraumacure.com. And then again, you can find Tracie Jae's work at thequietrebel.org. And NAMI has a helpline. So if you have questions about mental health and mental illness, the information is there on the screen for you, and you can contact them and really just help get into whatever resources are necessary for you. So thank you everybody for joining me today for Demystifying Mental Health. And I will remind you one last time to evolve.